think this kind of addresses slide 7 and maybe goes a bit into the direction Kevin was going,
Okay.
where it seems like on slide, I believe it's slide 5, that we're sort of saying, or I'm sorry, slides 3 and 4, we're saying on slide 3 for the perdurant, I'm sorry, slide 2 and slide 3, we're saying in endurantism that Frank is like a point traveling along a line of time. So he's a single point and he's moving along this line and he's changing over time.
Sort of.
Whereas,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah. So on presentism, there's no timeline because there's not actually a
mhm,
substance that's time. Rather just so think of these each of these moments T1, T2 are different stages of Frank. So he's changed, and
okay.
so we're talking about like earlier than states of affairs that are no longer actual, and then the points to the right would be future that are not yet actual.
I would say with the perdurantist view that Frank is not any one of these points. He is the line that crosses through all these points. So
Right.
in the same way that a nation isn't a single person, it's any of these people collected together, or I am not a single cell, I'm a collection of cells, and you could remove any one cell and replace it with another, and you could do the whole ship of Theseus thing where you replace all my cells, and we'd probably still recognize that as me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm not, I'm just the collection I am of points pass through the line. I am the line. I'm not any one of these points. So all the points are Frank. And he's not changing over time because the line is not moving through time. The line simply is. But it is changing with respect to its position at time because at each position it is a different point.
Sure. And so what I would say is I have been careful. I've maybe not careful enough to try to say when I'm referring to Frank in a particular time slice. I've said like the three-dimensional object, and I've like carved on the three-dimensional object at
Mhm.
T2 or the three-dimensional object at T6, to try to like make the difference. Because you're right that on the B theory, on perdurantism, Frank is all of them together. He's the four-dimensional whole that is all these parts put together. But when people have an experience of Frank, we only ever experience a three-dimensional object. And so I think when people refer to Frank, who is that over there? That's Frank. They're referring to the three-dimensional object that they're looking at. So they're not thinking of him as a 6-year-old, for example. They're just referring to what they're looking at over there, which is the three-dimensional object. And so I think it's natural in our experience to say, well, how does Frank change over time? We seem to have this experience of Frank changing, and B theory denies that and says, no, you don't. You have that experience, but it's illusory. He doesn't actually change over time. You're just experiencing different Franks, or different, like sort of like different Franks. I mean, I get that like the being is this four-dimensional object, but when I say Frank, I'm talking about that body and that consciousness over there, if that makes sense.
I think that somewhat assumes an A theory framework because let's say Frank and I are, we've been best friends. We were born at the same time. We've been schoolmates throughout our entire life. It's not 30-year-old me that is experiencing 6-year-old Frank. It is 6-year-old me that is experiencing 6-year-old Frank
Mm-hmm.
and 10-year-old me experiencing 10-year-old Frank and so on. Those lines intersect at points. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's not like I am experiencing different Franks or past Frank. I never experienced past Frank. Past me experienced past Frank in an A theory sense.
Sure.
But
Let me ask you this: Do you are you in school or do you work?
I work.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm full-time employed.
What's the first name of your boss?
David.
David. Okay. So when you think, hey, I have a meeting with David today, are you thinking I have a meeting with a four-dimensional object, including his childhood and his birth and all that kind of stuff, or are you thinking I have a meeting with that consciousness that I'm going to meet with, that physical body? Are you thinking of the moment that you're meeting with this object? I would argue
I
that
think
you're probably thinking of just the physical body you're going to experience and the things he's going to say.
I would probably say I think in a way that's more like an A theory time sense. But
Sure.
I also think that's sort of the argument of B time theory is that A theory is a psychological view of time, and therefore it's not unusual that we think of it that way.
Sure, and so and that's sort of part of my point, is that the common sense way of understanding the world is the A theory. It wouldn't be a psychological appearance to us if it didn't appear to us that way. And so sort of like these are different ways of showing that it seems to us like we live in an A theory world. And we'll get to later on. My last slide is actually there's a logical. It violates the laws of logic. So we'll get into that later. But for now, I'm kind of showing different ways that B theory's account of how we experience the world is completely different than how it seems to us. Like there's these different ways that it violates our intuitions or the way the world seems to us, and that's kind of what I'm trying to draw out with these different slides.
Okay, I'd like to see the rest of your slides, so I'm happy to step back for a moment and let you progress further.
Thank you for listening. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe. Please also look at the show notes in order to find a link to our group so that you can join our next discussion. I look forward to chatting with you.